1 minute ago. Diddy's lawyer walks out live after audio leak exposes his decade-long cover-up. The courtroom was supposed to be the stage for Sean Diddy Combs' legal redemption or reckoning, but no one expected the spotlight to shift so suddenly, not to the man at the defense table, but to the man sitting beside him. In a jaw-dropping twist, Diddy's top defense attorney, Anthony Rico, resigned from the case just months before trial. And behind that decision may lie a piece of audio so damning, so explosive, that it triggered the first major collapse from within. What did Rico hear, and why did it drive him away? The answer may change the entire course of this trial. This report contains references to alleged abuse, coercion, and legal testimony related to sexual misconduct and violence. Viewer discretion is advised. In a stunning move that sent shockwaves through both the entertainment and legal communities, celebrity defense attorney Anthony Rico officially withdrew from Sean Diddy Combs' defense team just weeks before the trial of the decade. And while court filings describe the departure in vague professional language, whispers from inside the courtroom tell a different story, one involving a mysterious audio recording, internal conflict, and a defense strategy under strain. Let's rewind. Back in late 2024, when Diddy was first arrested on multiple federal charges, including trafficking, coercion, racketeering, and assault, the rap mogul wasted no time assembling a so-called dream team of legal heavyweights. Among them was Rico, a seasoned criminal defense lawyer, known for his composure, precision, and record of success in high-stakes trials. Rico was more than just a name. He was seen constantly beside Diddy in court, sharing notes, consulting strategy, and visibly defending his client in the eyes of both the court and the press. His presence was meant to symbolize strength, a counterbalance to the gravity of the charges and the growing media storm. But in February 2025, just 3 months before the May trial date, something changed. Without warning, Rico filed a motion to withdraw. The official court document was brief but pointed. He could no longer effectively serve as counsel, he wrote, citing professional standards. No elaboration, no press conference, no comment. The silence, however, only amplified the speculation. Was it ethical conflict, personal reasons, or something darker? That's when rumors began to surface about an audio recording. Courtroom insiders whispered about a chilling soundbite played in a closed session, or possibly during behind-the-scenes preparations, an audio so potent, so disturbing, it allegedly shifted the tone of the entire defense team. Though details remain scarce, sources say the recording may have contained the voice of a victim, or perhaps something implicating so powerful it caused Rico to step away. Remember, while much of the public's focus has been on a 2016 surveillance video showing Diddy in a physical altercation with his former partner, Cassie Ventura, that video wasn't scheduled to be played in open court until May. Rico quit in February, so if audio was involved in his exit, it was something else. That mystery is what's driving headlines and raising alarm bells. Because when a top-tier lawyer walks away from a high-profile federal case mere months before trial, the implications are massive. Rico wasn't just a player in the background, he was leading the charge. And then suddenly he vanished from the defense table. Now let's talk about the defense strategy. With Rico gone, Diddy's remaining attorneys, including Mark Nipolo and Timmy Garagos, have continued to argue that every interaction described by the prosecution was between consenting adults. According to their narrative, while some behavior might be unconventional, none of it was illegal. But prosecutors see it differently. They've presented statements from hotel security guards, hired silence from those paid to look the other way, and even witnesses who claim they were lured into traumatic situations under false pretenses. It's these testimonies, coupled with growing circumstantial evidence, that paint a very different portrait of Diddy's world. And still, the shadow of Rico's departure looms large. One legal analyst put it this way: when someone like Anthony Rico walks away, it's not because of a scheduling conflict. He saw or heard something that made him reconsider everything. This is where the story truly deepens and where new figures emerge. According to court files obtained by NBC News, Rico's motion cited adherence to the American Bar Association's criminal justice standards. But some speculate it was less about standards and more about self-preservation. After all, defending someone isn't just about facts. It's about what you're willing to be associated with. And for Rico, perhaps the line was finally crossed. Meanwhile, outside the courtroom, public opinion is shifting. Diddy's camp once projected control and confidence. Now they look reactive. Rico's exit didn't just rattle the legal team, it emboldened the prosecution. Sources say several new witnesses agreed to testify after hearing about his withdrawal, believing the case was beginning to crack. Still, Diddy's attorneys are holding the line. They've doubled down on efforts to suppress certain pieces of evidence, including arguing that some charges stem from statutes with historical bias. It's a bold strategy, but with a shrinking team and mounting evidence, it may be a desperate one. And here's something else worth noting. Rico's departure isn't just a dramatic subplot. It may mark the beginning of a domino effect. Insiders suggest more members of Diddy's inner circle are considering cutting ties, and that federal investigators are now scrutinizing not just the events from years ago, but also more recent legal maneuvers. What did Rico hear? What's on that rumored recording, and is the truth finally unraveling? As the trial edges closer, the stakes continue to rise. This case, already full of secrets, appears poised to reveal even more, and Rico's dramatic exit might just be the moment everything began to shift. After Rico's abrupt exit sent tremors through the courtroom, all eyes turned to what might have driven such a seasoned legal mind to walk away. Whispers of a mysterious audio recording began to swirl, unverified, unconfirmed, yet utterly impossible to ignore. Then, in a private evidentiary review held just days later, the rumors found their shape, a never-before-heard audio file that allegedly captured an incident too explosive to stay sealed. Sources close to the prosecution confirmed that the recording was not part of the original discovery packet. Instead, it arrived anonymously postmarked from a federal holding facility. Legal analysts now suspect it originated from a protected witness in an unrelated case whose identity remains sealed for safety reasons. The contents still under tight restriction, but one courtroom source described it as career-ending, if not case-ending. And here's where the chaos begins. Inside the judge's chambers, the audio was reportedly played for counsel under seal. Those present say the room shifted, not just in tone but in allegiance. Attorneys who had spoken confidently just a week earlier now looked visibly shaken. 2 defense attorneys requested a recess before court reconvened. One source alleges that Rico himself had demanded the court immediately remove him from any further representation after hearing the tape. What could be so damaging, some speculate. The audio captures an off-record exchange between Diddy and a former associate, one in which acts of coercion, manipulation, and financial payoff are discussed in chilling detail. Others whisper of a possible direct confession layered in arrogance and disregard. Still, without an official release or transcript, speculation runs wild. Outside the courthouse, reporters and demonstrators camped for hours hoping for leaks. Legal pundits on social media debated the rules of admissibility. Could an anonymously submitted tape be considered evidence? Would it meet the standards of authenticity and chain of custody? Former federal prosecutor Angela Benton weighed in live on network coverage. If this audio is what people say it is, it could qualify as a spontaneous declaration under exception to hearsay rules. But its path into court matters. The defense will fight it tooth and nail, and they did. On the following court date, Diddy's legal team, now without Rico, filed an emergency motion to suppress the tape on grounds of unverified origin and prejudicial content. But the judge, after reviewing the chain of custody logs provided by federal investigators, allowed a portion to be played in court. That moment changed everything. Courtroom sketches captured the moment. Diddy's expression turned from measured to pale. His remaining counsel stood rigid. In the gallery, a gasp rose from the crowd, and though no official transcript has been released, the words allegedly spoken in that audio are now etched into the cultural record. They don't talk unless we pay them. And if they do, they don't last long. What followed was chaos. A defense objection. A call for mistrial. The judge silencing the room. A recess that stretched from 20 minutes to 2 hours. When proceedings resumed, the defense appeared. Fractured confidence eroded. And yet the prosecution had barely begun. This single piece of evidence not only shifted public opinion, it restructured the entire rhythm of the trial. Media narratives pivoted overnight. Headlines stopped asking if Diddy could survive the case and began asking who else might fall with him. Among the names dragged into speculation, Cassie Ventura, the former partner, whose civil suit was settled just months earlier, and even music executives allegedly present at certain hotel gatherings. But the tape didn't just implicate them by proximity. According to 2 legal analysts who heard the courtroom playback, the voice on the audio names individuals, dates, and methods enough to trigger fresh subpoenas. And so the case expanded. New witnesses were called, a former assistant, a bodyguard, even a driver who hadn't been on the prosecution's list before. With each, the story widened. The alleged network described in the indictment a system of silencing, controlling, and protecting the star's private operations started to sound less like conjecture and more like a shadow organization. And as for Rico, the former defense attorney, has made no public comment. He declined interview requests from CNN, The Washington Post, and Rolling Stone. But an insider close to his firm shared a quiet statement. He did what he had to do. It wasn't just about law, it was about conscience. Meanwhile, Diddy's team scrambled. Legal briefings were delayed. A new senior litigator was brought in from Washington, D.C. under emergency motion. But for many, the damage was already done. Trust was shattered not only between defense and public, but within the camp itself. One source close to the Combs team whispered to the press outside the courthouse, "He's not worried about prison. He's worried about what comes next." Because this trial, no longer confined to one man, had begun pulling threads that could unravel the entire fabric of entertainment's elite. And the jury hadn't even been seated yet. As the trial inched closer to its formal opening, the prosecution wasted no time reshaping its strategy around the now infamous audio. With the court's approval, a redacted transcript was prepared for the jury, and more critically, the recording unlocked something else: fear. Fear among those who once stood in silence. In the weeks that followed, a steady trickle of former insiders emerged, witnesses who had either worked for Diddy, worked near him, or simply witnessed events they could no longer justify ignoring. The courtroom no longer resembled a celebrity trial. It had transformed into a forum for confessions. First came Devin Marks, a former logistics coordinator for one of Diddy's touring companies. Nervous but composed, he testified under subpoena that hotel suites in multiple cities were retrofitted with high-end surveillance systems, cameras disguised as ventilation fixtures, sound recorders embedded in table lamps. The stated purpose, security, Marks recalled being told. But the placement, he insisted, was designed to surveil guests, not protect them. There were people being watched without their knowledge, Marks said, pausing before continuing, including artists, partners, and women invited to private sessions. The courtroom was silent. Next came a woman identified only as Alicia, a pseudonym granted by court order due to fears for her safety. A former hospitality contractor, she described events at a Las Vegas penthouse party where she claims she witnessed coercion firsthand. "I was told to never speak of it again," she said tearfully. "But that night, someone passed out after being given something in a drink, and no one called for help." Her testimony included shocking claims that 2 men described as staff blocked the room's entrance, while others filmed from multiple angles. The judge instructed the jury to disregard any uncorroborated assumptions. But the prosecution pressed forward, linking Alicia's testimony to data found on a recovered hard drive, previously ruled inadmissible. Now, with the audio opening a legal door, that evidence was under reconsideration. This wasn't just becoming a scandal. It was taking the shape of a criminal web. By now, the jury selection process had been suspended. The court agreed to an evidentiary delay, citing the new volume and gravity of witness statements. Over 17 individuals had been named as potential witnesses or co-conspirators by the prosecution, some of them public figures. Meanwhile, media outlets began connecting dots. A prominent entertainment lawyer on a podcast speculated that Rico's withdrawal may have stemmed from a growing list of individuals named in sealed filings, some of whom had hired their own counsel as a preemptive move. He saw a storm coming, the lawyer stated, and didn't want to be in the blast radius. Inside the courthouse, tension reached a new peak when an unexpected name appeared on the docket: Natalie Rivera. Rivera, a former executive assistant at one of Diddy's investment firms, had previously signed a non-disclosure agreement in a civil matter that barred her from speaking about events occurring between 2017 and 2020. But now, under court order, she was permitted to testify under limited immunity. And what she shared was damning. NDAs were weaponized, Rivera told the court. They weren't about privacy. They were about silence. She described internal emails where legal staff discussed containment protocols after leaks and detailed how her own attempts to report inappropriate behavior were met with veiled threats. "I was told my family would suffer if I said anything," Rivera said, visibly shaking, "that this went higher than just my boss, that I didn't understand how far this reached." Her testimony was backed by a forensic document expert who authenticated 3 internal memos, each outlining potential fallout scenarios that matched what began unfolding in court. And yet, for all the weight of these revelations, Diddy remained physically composed in the courtroom. No outbursts, no denials, only silence. Analysts called it a strategy. Some called it fear. Outside supporters and critics clashed as the case spilled into public discourse. Protesters held signs demanding justice for Cassie and other unnamed women. Others decried a trial by media, warning that speculation was outpacing fact. Meanwhile, journalists dug deeper into old lawsuits, long-forgotten settlements, and party photos from years gone by. Then another name entered the narrative, one that hadn't been spoken in public connection to the trial until now. Quincy Brown, the adopted son of Diddy and biological child of the late Al B. Sure, Quincy had remained mostly silent amid the unfolding chaos. But after Rivera's testimony, his name appeared in a sealed document attached to the prosecution's supplemental evidence motion. Its contents were not made public, but the implication was immediate. This case was no longer just about Diddy's actions. It was about the environment surrounding him. Insiders hinted that Quincy had provided federal agents with personal testimony months earlier, possibly describing household dynamics or events at properties under investigation. Neither the prosecution nor defense confirmed this, but his inclusion on a potential witness list sent shockwaves. By this point, 2 additional defense attorneys had filed to limit their scope in the case, citing ethical limitations. Though they did not exit, as Rico had their caution signaled a defense team under strain. Even the judge, in a rare courtroom aside, acknowledged the extraordinary nature of the proceedings. Rarely do we see a case evolve in real time like this. New information, new dimensions. Counsel will be expected to remain flexible and forthright. And so, with the next phase looming, both sides prepared for a volatile path forward. The prosecution had momentum, yes, but now bore the burden of proving systemic abuse beyond salacious claims. The defense, though weakened, still held cards: reputational damage, credibility of witnesses, and the challenge of proving consent versus coercion in decades-old stories. Yet no one denied the air had shifted. What began as a celebrity trial was turning into something far greater: a referendum on power, an indictment of silence, and the unraveling of a cultural fortress long thought impenetrable. By the time the calendar turned to April, what began as a celebrity trial had morphed into a legal spectacle teetering on the edge of historical precedent. The media, once cautiously curious, was now entrenched in full-scale coverage. Every network, every outlet, every talking head had taken a side, but inside the courtroom, one thing remained constant: Diddy's silence. With every new witness, the walls of his carefully curated empire began to tremble. But what stunned observers more than any revelation in open court was what began happening behind closed doors. One by one, former associates who had once stood loyally beside Diddy were now lawyering up, distancing themselves, and in some cases turning. Among the most pivotal was a man known only as Victor, a pseudonym used for a former personal security aide. Appearing via secure video testimony, Victor delivered a bombshell. He confirmed the existence of what he called shadow teams, private enforcer units, hired not just for protection but for intimidation and cleanup. When something went wrong, Victor stated these guys weren't calling police. They were fixing problems, paying people off, destroying evidence. Asked to elaborate, he spoke of an incident in Atlanta in 2018 where a woman collapsed during a private after-party. Rather than calling emergency services, Victor claims a team was deployed to confiscate phones and erase footage. The woman, he testified, was sent home in a private car unconscious. This testimony was followed by yet another escalation. The prosecution submitted a motion to unseal financial records believed to detail hundreds of thousands of dollars paid out in hush agreements. The defense objected fiercely, citing lack of direct ties to the charges, but the judge allowed a partial unsealing, and what it revealed was chilling. Over a 6-year span, Diddy's companies had authorized more than $4.2 million in discretionary payments, many routed through shell LLCs tied to talent management and event planning firms. Recipients, former staff dancers, assistants, most of whom had signed airtight NDAs. Then came the leak. An internal whistleblower identity withheld by federal order provided a trove of emails between top executives. The documents, verified by forensic experts, included references to disruption kits, a term used to describe protocols for responding to PR emergencies involving potential legal exposure. Several emails mentioned Sea Incident Vegas, believed to be a reference to the 2016 incident involving Cassie. One exchange dated March 2019 read simply, "The footage exists. Secure it. We cannot afford another slip. Rico is on standby." Suddenly, the context behind Anthony Rico's abrupt departure began to take shape. If he had indeed seen this information, or been asked to help bury it, it could explain his withdrawal and his carefully worded filing referencing irreconcilable conflict under ABA standards. Still legally, Rico remained bound by attorney-client confidentiality. He could neither confirm nor deny. And then perhaps the biggest blow yet came not from court, but from Capitol Hill. A group of 5 bipartisan senators issued a joint request to the DOJ, urging a federal investigation into the broader network surrounding Diddy's businesses. They cited growing concerns that the trial was merely scratching the surface of a more widespread culture of coercion, trafficking, and financial manipulation within the entertainment industry. The letter gained traction, and within 48 hours, the Department of Justice confirmed that a preliminary inquiry into financial irregularities was already underway, separate from the criminal trial. This was no longer just about Diddy. It was about who protected him, who enabled him, and who stood to lose if the entire structure collapsed. Inside the courtroom, the defense changed tone. Gone was the aggressive rebuttal of witness credibility. In its place, a more subdued procedural approach. They began focusing heavily on due process, emphasizing gaps in evidence chains, inconsistencies in memory, and the statute of limitations. But the jury, already overwhelmed by weeks of damning accounts, seemed unmoved. In an unexpected move, Judge Beverly Langston issued a statement to both legal teams, stating the court recognizes the magnitude and emotion tied to this trial. However, the rule of law must remain our North Star. Inflammatory rhetoric, leaks, or media theatrics will not influence this bench. Outside protests grew louder. A coalition of advocacy groups staged a demonstration in downtown Manhattan demanding full transparency and urging lawmakers to pass protective measures for whistleblowers in the entertainment sector. Chants of justice for Cassie echoed through the streets. Cassie, meanwhile, remained absent from the proceedings. Her legal team issued a statement reiterating that she had no direct stake in the criminal case, but stood in solidarity with all victims of abuse, known and unknown. Her previous civil settlement had barred further comment, but public opinion had already rallied around her. And just when it seemed the prosecution had played all its cards, a new witness emerged. Derek Houston, a former executive at a distribution label tied to Diddy, filed an amicus affidavit alleging that Diddy once boasted of burying careers with a phone call. Houston's statement detailed coercion tactics used to suppress negative press threats to advertisers, blacklists at award shows, and payments to media consultants. More damning was his reference to a meeting in 2020 where Diddy allegedly referred to an ex-girlfriend's allegations as manageable if we keep the machine running. It was a direct line into intent, a detail the prosecution seized upon to frame a pattern, not just of action but of cover-up. In response, Diddy's team issued their first public statement. Since the trial began, Mr. Combs maintains his innocence. He denies all allegations of coercion abuse or criminal behavior. The trial has become a theater of speculation, not justice. He believes in the process and awaits the verdict with confidence. But confidence was wearing thin. In the hallway outside the courtroom, reporters spotted a member of Diddy's entourage being escorted by federal agents. No charges were announced, but whispers swirled of a possible cooperation deal. And so the story continued. A collapsing defense, a rising tide of testimony, and a public reckoning that was no longer content with headlines but hungry for accountability. By the final week of the trial, the courtroom had become a crucible of anxiety. Every eye from media to public gallery was fixed on the defense table. Diddy sat motionless, his once defiant posture subdued, replaced by stillness that betrayed little. Outside crowds gathered daily, braving rain and cold, waiting for a resolution that had become bigger than one man. It had become symbolic. The prosecution gave its closing statement with measured intensity. "This is not about fame," lead prosecutor Lydia Chambers told the jury. "It's about power, it's about control, and it's about a man who believed he was untouchable." The jury, having endured weeks of emotional testimony, forensic evidence, and corporate documents, now bore the burden of judgment. Deliberations began late on a Monday morning and continued into the next evening. The nation watched, and then came the verdict. Guilty on 3 major counts, including coercion and obstruction of justice. The courtroom gasped. Reporters scrambled. Diddy closed his eyes, jaw clenched. His legal team huddled around him. The other charges, trafficking, conspiracy, were declared a mistrial due to a hung jury, but the damage was done. In the hours that followed, social media exploded. Justice for Cassie trended globally. Advocates hailed it as a watershed moment. Legal analysts predicted appeals, but few believed they'd succeed. A federal judge ordered Diddy remanded until sentencing, but the reverberations had already begun. Former associates, brands, and collaborators issued rapid-fire statements severing ties. An entertainment empire once seen as bulletproof was now fragmenting at every corner. And across the industry, a chill settled, an unspoken warning that the era of silence had ended. For victims, it was a vindication. For observers, a reckoning. And for the world, it was a reminder even the most powerful fall when truth demands it. As dawn broke over downtown Los Angeles, the city awoke to the aftershocks of a trial that had transfixed the nation. The conviction of Sean Diddy Combs was more than a celebrity scandal, it was a cultural turning point. In the days following the verdict, the entertainment industry scrambled to adjust. Record labels quietly scrubbed Diddy's name from upcoming releases. Streaming platforms began reviewing past collaborations. Some radio stations pulled his music altogether. "It's not censorship, it's conscience," said one station executive during a panel on ethics in entertainment. But perhaps the most telling reactions came from those who had once stood beside him. Former bodyguards and assistants released public statements, some corroborating stories told during the trial, others issuing carefully worded apologies for their silence. A few hinted they'd been threatened or compensated to stay quiet. A high-ranking music producer admitted anonymously, "We all knew something wasn't right. We just didn't want to be the first domino." The Department of Justice confirmed that further investigations were underway, specifically into corporate shell entities and foreign financial transactions tied to Diddy's empire. Prosecutors hinted that the trial may have only scratched the surface. And then there was the cultural shift. Advocacy groups praised the courage of survivors like Cassie Ventura, whose testimony became the emotional linchpin of the case. The Stand with Cassie movement surged online, inspiring a wave of other victims in the industry to come forward with stories that echoed the same dark themes: manipulation, silence, fear. College campuses, once saturated with admiration for hip-hop moguls like Diddy, now hosted forums dissecting the toxicity of unchecked fame and the systemic structures that enabled abuse. Meanwhile, inside the Metropolitan Detention Center, Diddy's legal team filed motions for appeal. His new attorneys claimed prejudicial media interference, arguing that leaked videos and social commentary tainted the jury pool, but experts called the chances of reversal slim. Still behind bars, Diddy was reportedly maintaining influence. Sources alleged he had formed a tight circle of powerful inmates, using his charm and resources to maintain a measure of control. Back outside, Ellen DeGeneres, who had recently faced renewed scrutiny following earlier allegations, was subpoenaed by a separate federal grand jury investigating abuses in the entertainment industry. Her representatives declined to comment. The ripple effect was undeniable. What started as a high-profile trial had become something else entirely: a mirror, held up to an entire era of celebrity worship of secrecy and complicity. It forced difficult conversations about justice, complicity, and the cost of staying silent. In the end, Diddy's downfall was not simply the collapse of a music empire. It was the long overdue reckoning of an industry, a culture, and perhaps a generation.